Hello, G-Dub-Dub. Welcome back to Maniac McGee. Louil said it had been too long since I've read this book, and I agree, Louil. We're on chapter 16, but let's revisit what we were doing before we left. Maniac had moved in with the Beals, and just before bed he went down to take a look at the address 728 on the door, and he's still trying to get this encyclopedia read, but he's got to sneak it out of Amanda's room. And sometimes he would just sit at the front window, being on the inside of the house. He loved almost everything about his new life, but everything did not love him back. We got a plane going over. I hope you can still hear me. Chapter 16. Maniac McGee was blind. Sort of. Oh, he could see objects all right. He could see a flying football or a John McNabb fastball better than anybody. He could see Mars Bar's foot sticking out trying to trip him as he circled the bases for a home run. He could see Mars Bar charging from behind to tackle him even when he didn't have the football. He could see Mars Bar's bike veering for a nearby puddle to splash water on him. He could see these things, but he couldn't see what they meant. He couldn't see that Mars Bar disliked him, maybe even hated him. When you think about it, it's amazing all the stuff he didn't see, such as big kids don't like little kids showing them up. And big kids like it even less if another big kid, such as Hands Down, is laughing at them while the little kid is faking them out of their Fruit of the Looms, which is an old school kind of underwear. And some kids don't like a kid who's different, such as a kid who's allergic to pizza, or a kid who does dishes without being told, or a kid who never watches Saturday morning cartoons, or a kid who's another color. Maniac kept trying, but he still couldn't see it, this color business. He didn't figure he was white any more than the EastEnders were black. He looked himself over pretty hard, and he came up with at least 7 different shades and colors right on his own skin. Not one of them being what he would call white, except for his eyeballs, which weren't any whiter than the eyeballs of the kids in the East End. Which was all a big relief to Maniac, finding out he wasn't really white, because the way he figured, white was about the most boring color of all. And there it was, piling up around him. Dislike. Not from everybody, but enough. And Maniac couldn't see it. And then all of a sudden, he could. Chapter 17. It was a hot day in August. It was so hot, if you stood still too long in the vacant lot, the sun, bouncing off a chunk of broken glass or metal, could fry a patch on your hide, which means your skin. So hot, if you were packing candy, you had soup in your pocket by 2 o'clock. So hot, the dogs were tripping on their own tongues. That's funny. And so hot that the fire hydrant at Green and Chestnut was gushing like Niagara Falls, courtesy of somebody wrenching off the cap. By the time Maniac and the rest of the vacant lot regulars got there, Chestnut and Green was a cross between a block party and a swimming pool. Radios blaring, people blaring, somebody selling lemonade, somebody selling Kool-Aid ice cubes on toothpicks. Bodies, skin, colors, water, gleaming, buttery, warm, cool, wet, screaming, happy. I don't know if you guys have ever gotten to play in a fire hydrant that's open, but when I was growing up, on really hot days in New York, they would open up the fire hydrant, the fire company would come around and do it, and you would play, and that water was coming out of there so fast. The younger you were, the fewer clothes you had on. Grown-ups sat on the sidewalk, and they dangled their bare feet in the running gutters. Teenagers stripped down to bathing suits and cutoffs. Little kids, underwear. And the littlest kids, nothing. Maniac danced and pranced and screamed with the rest. He learned how to jump in front of the gusher and let it propel him halfway across the street. He joined in a snake dance. He got goofy. He drenched himself in all the wet and warm and happy. And when he first heard the voice, he didn't think much of it. Just one voice in hundreds. But then the other voices were falling away in bunches until only this one was left. It was a strange voice, deep and thick and sort of clotted, as though it had to fight its way through a can of worms before coming out. The voice was behind him, saying the same word over and over, calling a name. And even then, Maniac turned only because he was curious, wondering what everybody was staring at. But when he saw the brown finger pointed at him, not a speck of icing on it, and the brown arm that aimed it, and the brown face behind it, he knew the name coming out of the can of worms was his. Whitey, and it surprised him that he knew. He just stood there, blinking through the water-dropped sun blur, the hydrant gusher smacking his thin, bare ankles. The radios, the people were silent. "You move on now, Whitey," the man said. "You pick up your gear and you move on out. It's time to go home now." The man was close enough to be catching some water around his shoes, which, Maniac noticed, were actually slippers. His pants were baggy, and his shirt wasn't really a shirt but a pajama top covered with high-tailed roosters. White hair curled around his ears. Maniac gave his answer. "I am home." The man took a step closer and dropped his arm. "You go on home now, son, back to your own kind. I seen you at the block party." "Oop, sorry everybody. Now, you get going." Maniac stepped out of the gusher. The water roared onto the opposite curb. "This is where I live. I live right down there." He pointed down Sycamore Street. The man didn't seem to notice. "Never enough, is it, Whitey? You just want more and more. You won't even leave us our little water in the street. Come on down to see Bojangles. Come on down to the zoo, the monkey house." He must be hard of hearing, Maniac thought, so he called it out really loud and slow and pointed again. "I live at 728 Sycamore. I do." The old man stepped closer. "You got your own kind. It's how you wanted it. Let's keep it that way. Now move on. Your kind's waiting." He flung his finger westward. "Up there." Suddenly, Hester and Lester were by Maniac's side, barking at the man. "You leave him alone, you old rag picker. You shut up." And the man was croaking and ranting, not to Maniac now, but to the people. "What happens when we go over there? Black is black, white is white. The sheep lie not with the lion. The sheep knows his own kind." A woman was rushing in then, pulling him away up the street. Our own kind! Our own kind!" The water thundered across the silent street. Maniac who was one of the world's greatest sleepers, didn't sleep well that night, or the next. He started getting up earlier than usual, not to sneak some time with the A book, but now just to run. Bow Wow wasn't even ready for his morning pee yet, but he went along. Usually a Maniac just jogged around the East End, but now he did the whole town, plus over the river to Bridgeport. By the third day, Bow Wow refused to go along with him. One morning, as Maniac was heading home, Hester and Lester came running up Sycamore Street. "Maniac, come on, we're going to run too. Let's go that way." They tried to turn him around, but he told them to just hold on a minute. He wanted to stop home for a quick drink, and then he'd go running with them. They kept yelling and tugging and pushing and grabbing his legs, and then Amanda was pedaling frantically up to him, slapping on a quick smile and gasping, "Hey, I'm going to the store. You want to come along?" Maniac checked the sun. It was hardly up to the second stories. "Stores aren't open yet," he said. Amanda just gawked. She was a rotten liar. Maniac knew it. He shook loose from the little ones, and he trotted on. He didn't know what, but something was wrong. The little ones jabbered and screeched and grabbed. He ran faster, faster. Mrs. Beale was out front with the yellow bucket, soap suds spilling over the brim, a stiff bristle brush in her hand. She was scrubbing the house, the brick wall, scrubbing furiously at the chalk, grunting with the effort, her cheeks wet. He had been way too early, way too fast. Only the F had been scrubbed away. The rest was quite easy to read, the tall yellow letters, the same color as the scrub bucket. Ishbelly, go home. And that is the end of chapter 17.